Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Today, the game is different.
I want to gamble. Gambling is a very serious business. Is that clear?
Welcome to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you here, deep from the swamps of Jersey. We got a great show coming up for you. It's been an incredibly busy time in the sports betting world. Maryland looks like they're finally going to launch their mobile sports betting industry. Some interesting things are happening in Washington, D.C., and even Arkansas is making some news in the sports betting world. And when we want to get to the bottom of what's going on in the gambling world, we call on one of the many talented writers from Better Collective. This week, I'm going to be talking with Bennett Conlin from USBets.com and SportsHandle. He's going to fill us in on some of the biggest gambling stories in the news today. So stick around. We'll be right back with House of Cards.
Game starts at 20, bet slip is empty. I gotta call KG.
KG, what up?
I got nothing for you, Fox.
Ah, come on. What you got, huh?
And it's spa day, Jamie. You don't interrupt spa day.
Ah, okay. Gracie, what's up? I need some tips.
Jamie, you want a tip?
Yeah. No. Come on, somebody. Jalen, what's up, man? You want a tip? Yeah.
You really want a tip?
I really need some tips.
Don't call somebody on live TV, Jamie Foxx.
Well, you answered. Have other friends anyway.
Marshawn, Barry, holla.
Jamie Foxx. Hey, what's up with it, Fox?
Listen, I need some tips.
I like L.A.
L.A.?
No, Dallas. No,
Dallas?
Dallas not the
Dallas?
best. We gotta get to Miami.
How about Detroit?
Nah, Barry over there.
You know what? I'm gonna call y'all right now. Vanessa, I need your help.
I got a tip for you. Always go with your gut.
I like that. Going with my gut. Let's go with our gut.
Psst. Yeah, you. Come here. Haven't you heard? We don't need to hide anymore. Now, we can shop privately for adult products at adamandeve.com. They've got massage oils, lingerie, and lots more we can't mention here. Use offer code SPICE404. They'll give you 50% off almost any one item, 3 free DVDs, free mystery gift, and free shipping. That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at adamandeve.com.
You're listening to the House of Cards.
Why, you cheap crook, stealing a baby's bank. It's only a lend-lease. I figured to bet on the 50-to-1 shot and double the baby's money. Why, you imbecile. Why don't you pick a 100-to-1 shot and triple it? Oh, okay.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. It's been a busy couple of weeks in the sports betting world. Maryland is getting ready to launch their mobile sports betting industry. Washington, D.C. is making some news in sports betting, and even some interesting things are going on in Arkansas. And we are lucky to have a returning guest who has written about all these topics. Bennett Conlin is a great writer from USBets.com, SportsHandle, and Better Collective, and Bennett is on the line with us right now. Bennett, thanks for coming back on.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I told you off air, I am so glad you're back on because Maryland is such an interesting jurisdiction. It's like one of those places where we know they're going to launch mobile sports betting pretty soon. And I think everyone I've talked to has stated something along the lines of, well, it's about time. But before we get into the launch of the mobile sports betting, give us a little rundown of what's going on with sports betting in Maryland as we speak right now. They do have retail sports betting in the state, but how many retail books do they have at the present moment?
I believe they're up to 8 now.
Okay.
So they had 5 casinos that launched last December. So those are sort of the main places people are going. And they also have some small businesses now who are getting into retail a little bit. Mm-hmm. They've gotten up to 8, and they have a few others that are sort of on their way. It takes a little longer for some of these smaller businesses that sort of assume it might take them just a month or two to figure some things out, and they realize there's a lot that that goes into launching a sports betting operation. So it's taken a little longer
Sure.
for a couple places in Maryland. But they've got some decent retail spots. I would expect them to add more moving forward as more small businesses, maybe realize that retail is the way to go for them instead of mobile. So I think there will probably be some more that come, but there are certainly retail options. So there are legal sports betting options for Marylanders. But yeah, it's been a long way for mobile.
Yeah. Well, as I said, you mentioned mobile. They're about ready to launch mobile sports betting in Maryland. Tell us about the process that the state has gone through over these past months. A lot of people felt it took more time than they thought it would. I mean, were there stumbling blocks along the way, or did the process just take longer than everyone thought?
I think like a little bit of both on that. So for Maryland, the legislation kind of created this separate commission in addition to the lottery. So it's called the Sports Wagering Application Review Commission, which they shortened to SWARC. and that group was created to essentially look into like diversity and inclusion measures within the industry. So legally, they had to complete a disparity study, sort of looking at what they could do in terms of race and gender measures to make the sports betting market in Maryland more diverse. And the study took a lot longer to, I guess, get assigned out, get contracted out, and then complete than they were expecting. So that took a really long time, and they couldn't really do a lot until that was done. I think people are a little frustrated because that sort of came back and told this work that legally they could not do a lot to guarantee diversity within the industry. So there are only so many measures they could really take legally within sort of their right that could, I guess, benefit or enhance diversity within the industry. So essentially they took, a year or so throughout the completion of this study to find out that, hey, you can't actually do that much. So people were frustrated by that because it took a lot of time and didn't necessarily lead to much. I guess we'll see sort of in the future how diverse the industry becomes in Maryland, but kind of tough now to say that it necessarily worked the way some of the legislators were hoping when they wrote some of the language in the law. So an interesting twist there, I suppose, and people are mad at this work, but I don't know if it's necessarily their fault. I think some of it is just the way that the law in Maryland is written sort of created a system that was going to take a long time. And if you do want to get mad at this work, I think you could probably get mad at them for maybe a lack of transparency throughout the process. They had numerous monthly meetings where they said, we're still waiting on the study, but they didn't really have a concrete timeline on when things would happen, which led people to sort of just speculate more about why it was taking long and when it might actually launch.
I'm glad you mentioned SWARC because that was going to be one of my questions to you because we've gotten questions here at the radio show about SWARC. They wanted to know what was SWARC. Personally, I just think people like saying the word SWARC. And how many people were on SWARC? What was the process all the way through regarding SWARC? Because they, like you said, they seem to be taking the slings and arrows about the time frame this took, but they're not really to blame. It was the situation around what was going on with SWARC.
I would say so, yeah. So it's a group of 7 people that were appointed by various people within Maryland, and they all have different backgrounds. Not all of them in gaming, a lot of them not in gaming, which I think maybe makes people a little bit frustrated as some people have more gaming experience than others. So there are certainly conversations since Maryland's launched retail and is planning to launch mobile that I guess most people in the industry would maybe roll their eyes at or things that like you might hope that this work would know that they didn't. Mm-hmm. So there are things there that make sense. There's, the fact that they took kind of a while for certain meetings was they would do monthly meetings and it was a challenge to get some people because of all the other things they had going on in the same place, even if it was virtual, just to have time each month to meet. So that was certainly something that was interesting. But yeah, I don't really think it's their fault. I mean, the last like 6 months or so, it really feels like the commission members haven't actually had that many conversations about things going on. They've just been kind of waiting. So it's not necessarily their fault that it's taken this long, although they are certainly in a position where with the lottery, which in Maryland, the lottery actually has done a pretty nice job moving pretty fast with some sports betting things. Mm-hmm. It certainly creates a situation where the public gets mad at this work, even though I would say it's more so on the language in the state sports betting legislation that's led to the delay rather than actions of this work.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
Drizzly makes it easy to shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and liquor from wherever I am. I just open the app, find what I want, and it's at my door in under 60 minutes.
Drizzly. Ding dong, Drizzly.
You're listening to House of Cards.
I'm talking sick piles of money. I'm talking lay on your bed in your Vegas room, throw the money in the air, and dance as it showers down on you money. I'm talking frosted glass limo money. I'm talking big cowboy hat, silver turquoise buckle money. I'm talking gambling.
I am in love with you.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you. This portion of House of Cards is brought to you by SCCG Management, delivering technology-driven capability, expertise, and customer and business value to the gaming industry for over 30 years. For more information, go to sccgmanagement.com. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Bennett Conlin from Better Collective, SportsHandle, and USBets.com. What I found interesting is that at one point in the process, the governor of Maryland, Governor Larry Hogan, wrote a letter to the Gaming Commission to try and move things along. I mean, I'm very curious. Was that letter even necessary? Was that for show? I mean, did that correspondence cause the process to move along quicker, or really that really had no impact on the speed of the process of implementing mobile sports betting in the state?
I don't think it did a lot in terms of speeding up the process necessarily.
Yeah.
They did become significantly more transparent about their timeline after that. So I think he turned the heat up a little bit in terms of like, could you at least tell us what the plan is for coming months, even if the plan is sort of a really slow, delayed launch. And kind of just wanted to know what it was. So he had also, Governor Hogan had put in there that he was hoping they would launch by the start of football season. I think that was just sort of a line that he threw in. There was not really a realistic shot that was going to happen. But they then became more transparent about the timeline, and they were giving more frequent updates of what they knew about the timeline. So from that perspective, I think it helped a little bit in terms of just people understanding what was actually going on. But yeah, I don't think that letter necessarily changed the timeline at all, because they were still waiting on other bodies and the disparity study and things like that before they were able to actually do anything.
I have an office in New Jersey, which has a well-established sports betting industry, but I also have an office in Massachusetts who is right now going through the process of trying to figure out the best way to launch their sports betting industry. They're having some issues with regard to granting temporary licenses versus permanent licenses, whether to launch retail before mobile or try to launch them both at the same time. What were some of the top issues that Maryland had to work out in order to make this launch possible? I'm trying to think of what can Massachusetts learn from Maryland, because it seems like I'm hearing the same things coming out of Massachusetts that I heard from Maryland.
Yeah, I think some of it is maybe listening to outside parties a little bit. I think that's an area where probably even legislators could have benefited a little bit. I mean, I think they were well-intentioned with their idea of creating more diversity within the state's sports betting industry. But I think other people probably could have told them that, hey, like, it might not be, legally possible for the SWORC to sort of guarantee ownership stake and certain things like that within different sports betting companies. You can't necessarily force that on the industry. So I think that's an area where, hey, if at the beginning of the process people were more familiar with the industry, knew more about it, or willing to listen to people who knew a lot about it, it could have been a very differently set up law. And I mean, I think there's still some good intentions in Maryland about what could happen with diversity in the industry, and there are some businesses that have launched retail sports books or are launching them that do have diverse ownership, which is awesome. But it's hard to say that it's necessarily a more diverse sports betting market than other states. I guess it'll kind of remain to be seen how that develops over time. But yeah, I would say for Massachusetts, I think just trying to listen to people within the industry, they often know sort of how things work better than some of the people on some of the commissions, in my opinion.
So when we're talking about mobile sports betting in Maryland, who are the operators that we're talking about? Are they the familiar names that a lot of sports bettors around the country are familiar with?
It is, yeah. So you're going to have a lot of those big names, DraftKings, FanDuel, they've all gotten qualified, BetMGM, Caesars, by the Maryland Lottery. So they're through the first step of the process. They'll be moving forward. And then there's a SWORC meeting on November 21st when the SWORC is expected to award licenses, which is another major step forward. And then after that, you're probably looking at an early December launch. But yeah, you're getting some of the major operators that people are going to be familiar with: BetMGM, Caesars, DraftKings, FanDuel, Barstool, PointsBet, some of those other major ones as well.
You know, we should have been keeping count of how many times we say the word SWORC in this interview, so just keep a running tally. But I'm curious about the sportsbook operators. In Maryland, is there a requirement that the mobile sportsbook operators be partnered with a land-based casino in the state, or can the mobile sportsbook operators be untethered, or they don't need a partnership with a land-based entity?
Yeah, so typically a lot of them have tried to, but you're able to sort of also just apply for the mobile license. But a lot of them are already partnered.
Oh, there are. Okay.
They already wanted to get in. So a lot of them actually have retail sports books up and running in Maryland. You're looking at like Barstool has one, BetMGM, Caesars. I think DraftKings is the one that doesn't yet, but I know they've got some things that they're considering. And then FanDuel also has a retail sports book. So they got in through that, which gave them some partners in the industry, which also helps them sort of check off those boxes when it comes to the few, I guess, diversity measures that the SWORC is able to implement. So once you have some of that like local tie and maybe some increased diversity there, it helps with your chances of getting the mobile license. So some operators have certainly done that, and it's made sense, I think, for them and sort of the state's sports betting market. And then you also get yourself, familiar with some of the customers as well.
Anytime a jurisdiction launches a sports betting or mobile sports betting industry, I'm always curious to see if there's a business or a sportsbook operator that is unique to that state, or maybe a new sports betting business that is launching for the first time. I always look to Tennessee because they launched Action 24/7. That was only in Tennessee, run by people from Tennessee, and it's just Tennessee-based. Does Maryland have that type of business that is unique to the state, or is it basically the usual suspects that we know about from other states in the sports betting industry?
Usual suspects so far, but it's interesting because they can give up to 60 mobile licenses.
Wow. Okay.
Which is, yes, very, very high. They had about 10 in the first application window. So I don't know why they said 60. I think you could get to a point. They haven't officially announced the SWORC and lottery that they will reopen another window, but I would expect them at some point to sort of reopen where other businesses could apply. I think after that, you might get some more localized one where people in Maryland are like, hey, let's give it a shot and see what happens. But at the same time, I think a lot of small businesses have sort of realized that there's this pretty huge barrier to entry in terms of getting into mobile, where it might make more sense for them just to have retail kiosks at their restaurant or bar or whatever, where it's a little bit easier for them to maybe make a little money, but they're not necessarily competing with these major operators that have a huge customer share and are well known across the country. So I think you could get some that are maybe a little more localized, which would certainly be interesting. But right now, they had that 60 possible licenses and they only had 10 apply. So I think some smaller businesses are maybe a little bit more skeptical at this point and want to see how things play out.
Has there been a definite date when people can expect the mobile sports betting industry to launch in Maryland? I mean, is the date more fluid, like end of the year or by the Super Bowl, or do people have any idea of when this launch will occur?
Yeah, so no official date. You've got the November 21 meeting when I think some of the licenses will be awarded, but then the lottery has to do this final phase of controlled demonstrations, which still trying to get some of the details on that. It sounds like it could be a little clunky, but we'll see how that goes. But that's supposed to take a little bit of time. So the lottery sources that I've spoken to and the lottery staff have told me that they would expect early December rather than late November. So I think early December, and certainly by the end of 2023, but early December is sort of the timeline I've been told as the most likely launch of mobile sports books.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards. Hey, this is Dave Weishuttle from House of Cards with your House of Cards gaming report for the week of November 14th, 2022. BetMGM announced the launch of a Detroit Lions-themed slot machine. Detroit Lions fans in Michigan can now play Lions Deluxe, a 3-reel slot machine designed by Every Digital. This brand new slot machine will have a nudge function which will allow players free spins in order to win possible jackpots. BetMGM became the official sports betting partner of the Lions in September of 2020. Drought conditions causing the Mississippi River to become shallow have revealed a bit of gambling history. The receding waters have revealed the Diamond Lady, which is a riverboat casino which was laying at the bottom of the Mississippi. The riverboat casino was in operation in the early 1990s and was sunk during winter storms in 2021. And finally, the slot machines at Harry Reid International Airport in Las Vegas reported a milestone. The machines in the famous terminal reached the $1 billion revenue mark. The slots were installed in 1968 and were the only slots located in an airport until 1993 when machines were placed in Reno Tahoe International Airport. Let's be honest, we've all played them waiting for a plane in Vegas. Have any news or tips regarding casinos, gaming, or legislation? Send us an email at newsroom@houseofcardsradio.com and follow us on Twitter at HOC Radio.
You're listening to House of Cards.
I bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day. No way. I'll give you 3-1 odds. Nope. 5-1. Nope. 10-1. You're on.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. The House of Cards Gaming Report is brought to you by Drizzly, your online liquor store. Available in over 95 cities across North America, Drizzly offers a huge selection and competitive pricing with a side of personalized content. Now there is no need to leave the house. Get alcohol delivered in less than an hour by Drizzly. Head on over to drizzly.com and order today. And now get $5 off your first order of $20 or more when using our promo code DRINK19 at checkout. Shop beer, wine, and liquor with drizzly.com. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Bennett Conlin from Better Collective, SportsHandle, and US Bets.com. What do you think the launch will look like? I mean, I've talked to people from Ohio whose sports betting launches January 1st, and they expect a large number of operators to go live that day. My God, even Pete Rose is going to place a bet in Ohio that day. Will Maryland look like that, or do you think it'll be staggered? Do you think some operators will go live on a certain day while others will go live later on? What do you think that'll look like, and what do people think that the launch will look like?
Yeah, so I think you'll have a decent amount kind of going at the same time in terms of probably the DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, some of those major ones. There are some other ones I could see maybe going slower, like Fanatics is one. I don't think they've even technically launched their sports betting operation yet. I think they've targeted maybe early 2023, and they're one of the operators who's been qualified by the lottery, so I'd expect them to maybe wait into the new year. But everyone else I would expect would try to go as fast as possible. I think you want to take advantage of it if you can, right, with some of the other customers trying to sign up and join these sports books. You probably want to be first moving if you can. Mm-hmm. So I would expect a lot of them to go, whether it's, the same day or within sort of the same time frame. And it kind of depends when they're able to do those controlled demonstrations, which is the final step with the lottery. So it's going to work similarly, from what I've been told, to what they did with retail sports books. So I think the sports book can maybe choose, I guess, how many customers this is really open to. But there's sort of a day where the mobile sports book will be online, and during that period people can use it. But then there's a day where they have to be offline, where the lottery checks and make sure everything is going well. And then they go online for another day, and then offline for another day of sort of checks with the lottery. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work, because I can see that angering customers if you're able to bet one day and the next day you just can't. So I could see that sort of frustrating people in the beginning if it's not thoroughly explained, or if maybe some of the sports books try to limit it to a really select number of customers. But so that process is going to take a few days, and sort of depends when you start it. So if a sports book starts it, a day earlier than someone else, and they can launch a day earlier on the backside of that. So, but I would expect it to be pretty clustered in early December with a lot of sports books going on.
Is there a sports book in Maryland that everyone thinks will do very well in Maryland? I mean, I gave the example of Massachusetts before. Everyone, since that's the corporate headquarters of DraftKings, everyone thinks Massachusetts is going to be great for DraftKings. But is there a sports book that, may do well in Maryland that we might not be thinking about?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it'll be interesting to see how some of them do with some of the promotional offers too, because I know some companies are trying to cut down a little bit on that. I know DraftKings and FanDuel have been pretty aggressive in some of their marketing and some of their early sign-up promotions and things like that. FanDuel is one that's had the most success with where it is retail, the retail sports book at Live Casino in Maryland. So that's one that's done really well from a retail perspective. I would imagine that they've got the, sort of the well-known presence nationally. So I'd expect FanDuel to have a lot of success in Maryland, some of the major players. And I would be interested eventually if you do get one of those local sports books that maybe people want to bet with them because it benefits a local business or something. But for now, that certainly seems like it'd be more at the retail side. But for mobile, I'd expect, some of those major players that we're accustomed to, especially FanDuel, to have some early success in Maryland.
Well, a moment ago, you talked about sports bettors being frustrated, which made me immediately think of Washington, D.C. So what's the latest coming out of Washington, D.C.? A lot of news is coming out of there.
Yeah, it's a super weird sports betting system where you can't bet on federal land, and then you have a lottery run app called Gambit DC, which is available outside of federal land, but then you also have sports books at certain professional stadiums. So I believe Nats Park is BetMGM, so you can use BetMGM and not Gambit DC inside of Nats Park.
Yeah.
And then for a 2-block radius outside of Nats Park, but it's not really a circle. It's kind of like a shape with lots of edges, I guess. That's the 2-block radius that I don't think anyone would expect. So you kind of have to just check your phone and wherever the geolocation lets it work.
I cannot believe some of these sports books don't put up signs saying this is a sports betting zone where you can. I mean, they have school zones. Why don't they have betting zones? And it's kind of a free advertisements for the sports books that they can put up.
That would be nice. I think that would be helpful for people too. I know they taught the apps maps on their apps a lot of the time, but it's not quite the same when you're trying to look at the map and then also look at, bets on your phone. So it's a unique system. Gambit DC has not had much success financially or from a user interface perspective or really anything. They had an iOS outage during the Super Bowl last year, which is quite possibly the worst day you could have an iOS app outage. So some of the DC council members are getting a little frustrated with what's going on. Alyssa Silverman is one of those. So she has proposed a bill to open up the market to those operators that are already there. So FanDuel has a retail book. Caesars has a retail book. BetMGM. So just opening it up to allow them and other operators mobile access. Pretty early stages of the bill. It didn't include any language on if there would be a limit to how many operators would be allowed and things like that. But her main focus is kind of getting away from Gambit DC and Intralot, which is the third-party provider that helps with Gambit DC, because they've had plenty of issues, and it was a non-competitive process. They were given a sole source contract during the bidding, so a little, debatable if they were deserving of getting that contract. I don't think they probably were. So there's certainly some push to open it up to other sports books, those national operators. At the same time, it sounds like with everything going on in terms of some of those council members trying to get reelected and being busy here the next few months, that might be more of a conversation that actually happens in the spring.
Well, let me ask you something about the bill. Does everyone feel that competition will solve the problems they're experiencing with Gambit, or do you think this bill is just offered up there to put pressure on Gambit to get their act together with regard to the sports betting? Is this bill designed to move forward, or is this bill a message to Gambit?
I think a little bit of both, but I think they've had numerous hearings with the council where they kind of just go off for about an hour and rip Gambit and how it's performed. So, I mean, they've certainly offered some warning shots about not performing well. I think there's a legitimate push to opening it up for competition, which I think could have some success. And I think they're more frustrated with Gambit too, is due to some of the marketing costs that they had last year. They ran a $4 million loss last year, which, is kind of tough. And they're sort of like the only place that's been unable to, have any beneficial tax revenue going to a jurisdiction. So I think that's one they were frustrated too, where it's like, hey, like if the app isn't great or whatever and you're making DC money, that's one thing. If you're losing Washington, D.C. money and you have a horrible app that everybody hates, maybe we look for something else. So I think there's definitely a push, and there's also an interest, I think, with some of the council members. The contract with Intralot runs out, I think it's in 2024. So that runs out the summer of 24. Maybe it's a 5-year contract that's sort of winding down a little bit. I think there's interest in, hey, let's just let that run out and have a system that works after that. And you might also revisit the lottery system. I know Councilmember Silverman is upset about the lottery as well, which Intralot has a role in as well. So there's a chance they just try to get away from Intralot as much as possible.
Well, is Gambit doing anything right now to correct some of the issues they've had in the past? Do you see that situation with Gambit getting better because of what Gambit is doing right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So they've added some promotions that they weren't quite doing as much. There's like some ways to easier make parlays easier in terms of actually putting that together in your app. And they did do an interface overhaul recently, so it's certainly a little bit easier to use. I wouldn't say it's nearly as user friendly as some of the major apps that people are familiar with, but it's definitely better than it was previously. I know, like in the past, if you wanted, I tried to wager once on the PGA Championship, so a golf tournament. And if you wanted to bet somebody to finish in the top 20 of the tournament, you had to click like 6 different tabs, and then you had to scroll through every golfer in the field in their winning odds instead of just being able to like close a drop-down menu. So they've switched things like that, which has made it a little bit better. So there's certainly some effort there to improve it. It's just it's tough too, because they've had so much trouble in terms of their reputation with the Super Bowl outage, and they initially launched with really subpar odds that weren't sort of typical of what people would see at sportsbooks. So they're kind of working their way up in terms of trying to, I guess, work past some of those previous reputational issues, and that's certainly been a challenge with getting customers interested.
So where do you see this D.C. bill going? Do you think there will be third-party mobile sports betting operators in D.C. very soon?
I'm still a little bit skeptical. I think it's one that maybe next year becomes more of a push, and maybe that could be something that happens. I think there's definitely interest with that, and I guess we'll see what happens with that. But I don't know. It's also, interesting timing, I think, with the bill being introduced. It was, I think, something that Councilmember Silverman has been honest about wanting to change, but at the same time, it's 2 weeks before the D.C. council elections, and she's in a pretty heated race with some other members there. So I don't know how much is it, trying to just have a last second push for some voters? How much is it thinking you can do something? How much is it actually just putting one out there to sort of share your frustrations with Gambit another time? So kind of hard to know exactly what it'll lead to. I think there's a possibility given Gambit's pretty horrible performance to this point, but at the same time, they've kind of let this contract go on here for a couple of years, knowing it hasn't been a particularly impressive sports betting app, and they haven't made any changes. So I don't know what it's going to take for the council to actually decide to make a change.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
For everybody. Game starts at 20, bet slip is empty. I gotta call KG.
KG, what
I
up?
got nothing for you, Fox.
Come on. What you got, huh?
And it's spa day, Jamie. You don't interrupt spa day.
Okay. Gracie, what's up?
I need some tips.
Jamie, you want a tip? Yeah.
No.
Come on, somebody. Jalen, what's up, man?
You want a tip?
Yeah. You really want a tip? I really need some tips.
Don't call somebody on live TV, Jamie Foxx.
Well, you answered. Have other friends anyway. Marshawn, Barry, holla.
Jamie Foxx. Hey, what's up with it, Fox?
Listen, I need some tips.
I'm like L.A.
L.A.?
No, Dallas. Dallas not the
Dallas?
best. We gotta get to Miami. How about Detroit? Nah, Barry over there.
You know, I'm gonna call y'all right back. Vanessa, I need your help.
I got a tip for you. Always go with your gut.
I like that. Going with my gut. Let's go with our gut.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Your Majesty, the royal wrestlers await. I'll bet on the little guy. How much? 3,000 guineas, 2 geese, and a duck. That's a foul bet.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you. This portion of House of Cards is brought to you by SCCG Management, delivering technology-driven capability, expertise, and customer and business value to the gaming industry for over 30 years. For more information, go to sccgmanagement.com. One more question for Washington, D.C. I know that Caesars Sportsbook made some enhancements to their property in the Capital One Arena. What are some of those improvements that are happening with Caesars at the arena?
Yeah, that's a fun one. It's certainly the biggest retail book in DC. Really fun spot. They've got a bunch of TVs, a pretty sizable lounge. So they changed it a little bit to make the restaurant and the sports betting portion a little bit more separate. So right as you walk in, they now have sort of an area that has a bunch of kiosks, and there's still some other kiosks and betting areas, betting windows throughout the establishment. But now, if you are sort of at that upstairs restaurant, it's a 2-floor space with the second floor having majority of things up there in terms of the restaurant. You can watch a lot of games. There's still ways to wager, but they make it so that, hey, if you want to just go in and watch sort of like at the sports bar without being, I guess, inundated with sports betting, you're able to do that a little more. And they enhance their menu. It's a Guy Fieri menu now. Mm-hmm. So they've got some good food. It's certainly a fun sports bar. I've been there a few times. Not a bad spot at all if you're trying to watch a game and place a couple bets.
We don't have a lot of time left, but another state that's making some big news in the sports betting industry is Arkansas. What can you tell us about what's going on in Arkansas in the sports betting industry?
Yeah, it's a weird state with sort of the setup they have. So there's that revenue sharing rule, which if a third-party operator wanted to get into the state, they would have to partner with a casino, and the casino would receive 51% of the revenue from the mobile sports betting partnership. So far, some of those major operators, BetMGM, Caesars, DraftKings, FanDuel, all those guys have kind of said, no, thank you. They don't want a part of that. So you've got some smaller operators, some more sort of local sports books, I suppose, in Arkansas. Oaklawn Sports is the third sports betting platform that recently launched. They launched in September and sort of advertised it more in October. So they've got a few options, Arkansas bettors do. I think for the most part, there have been some complaints about whether it's just getting used to using the apps or some withdrawal and deposit options. But I do think the three sports books have worked hard to make it a little bit easier to withdraw and deposit. So I think those complaints are maybe going away a little bit. And I guess from a positive perspective, some of the sports books, I know Bet Saracen is one of them, and they try to really tailor it to Arkansas consumers. So I know they were offering like college baseball lines very consistently last year, which is a big deal in Arkansas. Whereas if you're using a major operator, it's kind of few and far between in terms of the college baseball odds and lines you can bet on. So they've done a nice job in that regard. It sort of remains to be seen how this market of not having those big operators will play out over time. But for now, I think there's, you've got a few options, and I think those operators are willing to sort of listen to customer feedback. So far it seems all right. I guess if things change in the future, you could certainly see the racing commission there maybe making a switch that allows for an industry that better encourages those national operators to come to Arkansas.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because I know it surprises a lot of people to hear that if you're a sportsbook operator, Arkansas is not the cheapest place to do business. I think that takes people by surprise a lot. But do you see that changing over the period? Is it working out well according to the sports bettors in the state, or has there been not a cry or a plead or anything like that, but has people brought up the fact that, boy, I wish we had the big sports operators in here?
There's definitely some of that for sure from Arkansas bettors being frustrated, whether it's, I know like Oaklawn Sports, they just launched in September, and then they sort of announced it more in October, but it wasn't really until like the end of October that they had sort of a sign-up bonus offer. And I think people were frustrated by that, where they signed up for this new sports book, and they're like, you don't even have a promotional welcome offer.
Yeah.
Whereas you would obviously see that or typically see that with some of those major national operators. So there's definitely been some frustration there. It's also one where it seems like once people sort of get into the app and start wagering that they kind of lose some of that frustration over time. Just knowing that they do have at least a few options. So there's some competition within the state. There's a lot of Arkansas-focused bets, which I think they like. So there's certainly some positives there, and I think it would take more time and maybe more negative developments for the Racing Commission to make a change. Just speaking with a spokesperson there, they talked about how the Racing Commission unanimously approved that 51% revenue-sharing rule and got legislative approval. So based on sort of their recent comments, they still feel like it fits what Arkansas wants. And it would probably take a pretty substantial shift in public opinion for that to get re-looked at.
Bennett, we're running out of time, but can you give out your website where people can read your articles and give out your social media address so people can keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, so SportsHandle.com is where most of my content is going to go, but there'll also be some at usbets.com. And then you can find me on Twitter, where I am at Bennett Conlin, BENNETT. CONLIN, just my name, and you should be able to find plenty of tweets with articles on that feed.
Bennett Conlin from USBets.com, SportsHandle and Better Collective, thanks so much for coming on and giving us an update about what's going on with sports betting around the country. Interesting things are happening in a bunch of places around the U.S., so I hope you come back on real soon to fill us in on it.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. I'll see you next time on House of Cards.
Across the desert plain, you build a house of cards around a lovely